We are going to be talking about finding your sweet spot in your business. This is based upon the book by Mike Michalowicz. One of his first books called The Pumpkin Plan. However, as with all business books, it's based upon sound business principles. Mike just is really good about putting things in a context that we can apply it to our businesses really, really well. But when you talk about the sweet spot, a lot of the graphics and things that we're going to be seeing today are going to be referencing that and why it's so important as a business to identify these things and work towards it. All right. So just like a little bit about us on this. We are a profit first professional, which means we are certified by Profit First and received the award for Profit First Firm of the Year in 2023, which was exciting for us. With that being said, we also realized that once Profit First really identifies your cash flow issues and the mechanics to help you through that. But once you identify that and get that solved, then it's like, what is next in your business, which is where we actually became Pumpkin Plan certified so that we could teach the principles that were in this book as well and also use it mainly in our marketing. But this is a lot of where the content, not just for today, but a lot of what we do here at Some of All Numbers in our fractional CFO strategy calls as well, to talk about the principles that make you really great as a business and make you profitable and help you solve problems. Because as entrepreneurs, once you solve a problem, then there's a new problem and there's a new problem. And that's just the nature of running a business. So today, for those of you that registered, you would have received like an assessment and a questionnaire. And so a lot of it, you're going to get a little bit. Now we're going to dive into it and you can review what your assessment was, or afterwards, you can take that assessment and see it's a self-assessment to just see where you land as we talk about the components of the sweet spot of your business. All right, you can see by the green and orange, this comes straight out of the Pumpkin Plan. But this lets you see what that sweet spot is. It is the dissecting area, what is of these three circles of knowing who your top clients are, what your unique offering is, and the systemization of your business. And today we're going to dive into all three of these areas and then really analyze more about why these areas are so important and why you can then operate in that sweet spot. And what that means is in the sweet spot, your organic growth should be consistent, that if you are operating in your sweet spot, then there should be a demand for what you should feel as a business owner is a constant demand for the product or service that you are providing, and that you are not dealing with these other things, the dollars for hires, the no one cares, and the price pressure that we'll go into a little bit more. What we want to do is, and here is that right here, organic growth occurs and stops being hard. And so today we're going to really be talking about being laser focused, identifying these. And I'm going to say that at Some of All Numbers, boy, we have been not knowing what this is, not knowing what this is, not knowing what this is. So I don't want this to come across as, hey, we know it all, we had it figured out in the beginning. And it's something that we constantly go back to. So this is something that for you is, as you are identifying it and working with your teams that you have, that you continually go back to this and say, I want to make sure we're always being laser focused on how these three circles intersect right there in that sweet spot. So we're going to start off with your top clients. So some of you are able to identify who they are by name. Some of you are going to be like, okay, their demographics. But what we're looking for is, who are the people that love what you offer and who come back again and again, or they buy more from you, or they stay with you depending upon your service? And who are your most profitable clients? And we're going to talk about that in a moment. And this is also the last piece that is really a key part of saying who your top clients are. They're ones that you and your team enjoy working with them, because we all have clients that it's like, oh, they love what we offer. They buy from us repeatedly, and maybe they're profitable, but boy, we do not enjoy working with them. And so all four of these kind of play in to who your top clients are. So I want to dive into a little bit about how we can find out and really decide and identify them. Because I'm in the accounting world, then oftentimes you're able to take your list of customers and then you can rank them by revenue. But for some of you, especially like if you think about the e-commerce space or you think about things that you don't have a repeat business with, you that this is not going to work. But for those of you that are able to identify, like this is who spent the most money with me, and you can rank that, and then you start looking, what do they all have in common about them, and what are some underlying pieces with each and every one of these that you could extract from. If you are one like in an e-commerce or another field where it's like, all right, who do I continually see from all over and over and over again, and perhaps you've got that list or you don't, then you start paying attention and you start saying, all right, who is it that I'm seeing on a more regular basis, and who do we really enjoy? So we also have this little cringe factor. And for when we talk about a cringe factor, we all have that person that when the phone rings and we see on caller ID who it is, and we go, ugh, that would be a negative cringe factor. And then we have other ones like, oh, good, I get to meet with this person, or the phone rings like, oh, good, I look forward to that. So in our company, we actually do it by a happy face or a sad face. That's it. That's all I want to know. Nothing more than that. And you get to see who, yeah, a thumbs up, thumbs down. Great way of thinking of it that way. Of who do we enjoy working with? And you start to see, like, what do they have in common with one another? So I pulled up this and I just was looking for a list of clients that was, obviously this is not our list of clients. That would be amazing if that was their revenue. But I was like, let's just take this of what they have in common. And these happen to be like the top businesses out there. But truly, it just looks like that, where you rank that, nothing more scientific than that. And you just rank it and say, all right, so if this were our top clients by revenue, then you could say, like, okay, box store, virtual store, box store, Schwartz Group, I don't even know, box store, Aldi, grocery store. And you start going down it and saying, okay, what do they have in common? Well, all of these areas, all of these so far there's no location that's in common. They're across the United States, and some of them are worldwide. And you go down and you start at the top and say, what are the identifiers here about who frequents it? There is no membership here, but Amazon does have a membership level, and Costco definitely is a membership level. No membership level here. This Aldi is more, it's not across the United States, it's regions of the United States. Again, all you're trying to do is looking this in a different way to say, what are the common denominators amongst the ones that seem to spend the most amount of money with me? Then you can have anomalies that are like, all right, I'm going to eliminate the Aldi because everybody else is across the nation, but Aldi is just in a region. And then say, does that hold true for the rest of them? And this also helps you to see, like we've talked about in other webinars, where your risk factor is. If this was your client list and you recognize right there that Walmart almost has twice of the gap between what Walmart, if this was your client, and they spent $628 billion with you, then the next one you'd be like, oh my goodness, if we lost Walmart, how would we ever make it? It would take the next three clients in order to make up what we lost from them. So that's a topic for a different day, but there is always things that you glean from of looking at your clients based upon the revenue that they generate. And sometimes you look at it over a long period of time. Everything that we do, we look in an annual basis or the most frequent 12 months. And then I'm going to say that I look at ours probably at least quarterly to see where are we, did anything change here, and where are the common denominators there. This cringe factor, like I talked about before, these are the areas that you would think of. So when I've got people that are working with my customers, the clients, then I ask them for their feedback. And most of the time they've got a gut reaction to it. but sometimes you've got to do a little like, what gives a positive cringe factor or a negative cringe factor? So do you love them or they make you cringe? Just that do they pay on time or they are not paying on time, or you have to follow up with them, or you have to nag them? That could add to, for depending upon what your business is. Do they buy more from you or come back or have repeat? And some of us, we it's hard to tell, or some of us are we don't have additional services, and so they just have been with you. A lot of that has to be with the retention rate. How long have they been with you? Might be another area of repeat business. Definitely the referrals and the reviews, and what just the smile that they give you if they're in person, or, oh, I've told my friend all about you, or whatever else. For many of us in our business, the cringe factor can be how responsive are they to what you need from them or what they expect back from you. But one of the areas here that definitely will give somebody, a client specifically, a negative cringe factor is if they do not share the values that you have. And I'm going to say that this is for us at Sum of All Numbers. This is an area that we have a few what we call immutable laws, that if you as a customer break those, we would actually let you go because it's so important to us. And one of those being in the field that we're in, if you ask us to be dishonest, then immediately we know you're not the right fit for us and it's time to sever the relationship. And that would be a negative cringe factor, that we don't want those people over and over again. And sometimes you can tell that before you engage with the client, sometimes you can't, but that allows you to see who your some of the common denominators of your top clients. The next piece is, as we're talking about what are the common denominators, and sometimes you know these things and sometimes you don't, but you can start looking for it. Depending upon what you've got as your product or your service, their marital status might have something to do with what makes them a top client for you, or where they actually reside, and if that even matters. It also may be who are the ones that go to these other things as well. So I'll use us as an example just because I can speak with authority from that space. But those people that are very familiar with Profit First, or Dave Ramsey's his philosophy, they'll fit very well here. And if those are things that are very near and dear to your heart, boy, you would be a top client, because we're going to be speaking the same language, and the things that are important to you are also important to us, and you are able to just have a much better experience together, and it puts you in our top client category there. And that's what I mean by places that our clients would frequent. But it might be for you that it is we've got clients that they build custom equipment for those that frequent five-star restaurants, or that restaurants that have celebrity chefs and such. And so you look at like who are people that frequent those same places. So it might be other vendors, it might be associations, it might be whatever, but that's what places they frequent mean. It also, if I looked at it by characteristic, when you look at the personal wealth, and I was trying like, what words do I use for this personal wealth? So if you are someone who is doing if you are someone that is giving excursion activities, like, hey, we do safaris in Africa, or we do specialized fishing trips in Alaska, or if it is a matter of like sailing in exquisite yachts or whatever else it might be, then you know that your top clients have to have some discretionable income in order to become your top client, and that otherwise they're not going to be able to afford you, or you're not going to align. So the personal wealth thing may be a big factor, as with age. So there are some of us that are very technological, and you're going to attract a different type of top client. I know that for us, we had one person that he's like, no, I want you to physically come into our office and work on our paper spreadsheets. And it was like, oh, this is not going to work. we know the knowledge, we could do a really good job, but that is not going to be, first of all, profitable for us. And it also is not going to let us shine and show what we're good at, as far as being able to be savvy with the technology that we use, in providing good financial, reports and such. So sometimes that age, I know we've got a real estate broker that is, recognizing they're building a new subdivision, and they are now recognizing who their new top client is for this specific project. So typically, as a brokerage company for real estate, their top clients have been people who need major problems solved that nobody else can solve it in order to put a real estate transaction together. That's a very different top client from putting in a completely new subdivision where every room, where they're smart homes and eco-friendly and water saving technology and everything like that. And so the funny part is that for all the other developments they've done up to this point, they've had printed brochures and come in and fill out, and we'll give you a whole copy of all your paperwork. And they've realized, oh my goodness, for this, nobody wants anything in paper, and they have to have video tours. And I think you've all seen that, where you look at a piece of property and you can walk through it yourself with the video camera. So knowing what your age and the demographics and what they are interested in, and again, for what they're doing and who they're trying to, appeal to, having it be, earth friendly is extremely important to this age group. And so they're going after a completely different top client for this next project. So as you're looking at the different services that you have, perhaps a different service is going to go towards a top client, which then lets you see that knowing your top clients for certain services is going to make a difference, and you're going to get some pushback as we go through, some of these things if your top clients shift based upon what your service or product that you are providing changes. Also, whether they own or rent their home can make a difference. So these are just some of the areas here that, came up with, and I'm sure there are much, much more depending upon what it could be, like what is their ethnicity, or what do they like travel, or I don't know, whatever, are they near retirement? All of those things, can come into play. For us, we've realized that our top clients are, entrepreneurial owners who there's just one owner. And if there are two owners, it's typically the spouse. And sometimes if there are two owners, it's okay, but they aren't really our top clients, because you've got two people with opinions. And we definitely know that if there are three owners, that doesn't always, land well. And so, and we already know that. And so for us, that is something that we've identified. All right. So what I want you to think of now is, what do I do once I have this information that you are going to document it? My ideal client is, and then you actually write it down. And when we're working with people, I take that radar graph, or that first, this here, and we actually write it down. This is your top client, and list all of these areas of, my top client is this person, and and really identify it. And then you go and say, how do I clone more and more? Where can I find more of these? Is my marketing reaching those type of people? Where else do they have something else in common that I can reach them in that area and get my message out to them? And then as you learn more information, then you can adjust that as you learn more and more, and say, wait a minute, I thought this was my top client, but then I realized that was just an anomaly, and I'm going to adjust it. And then this is the hardest part, is rejecting the customers who do not fit this. But I'm going to say that what's going to end up happening is, we're talking about truly, how do you create organic business without any effort? And rejecting is part of that formula. And it's really hard, because for most of us, money is money, and I'll take anybody's money. But at the end of the day, it really isn't. And it will hold you back. It will take an energy. And if we go back to those questions, oftentimes those ones that have a cringe factor are ones that take more out of you. They aren't as profitable. They don't return, and they suck the life out of you. So this one is probably the hardest, but it's something, when you document it and you actually write it down, then you can be like, okay, this is not going to land well. And typically we're optimists for a lot of the time, but it's like, realize that when you end up letting them go or something happens, but I knew that all along. And sometimes you can go back and see the clients that you've lost, and say, what didn't they have in common with my top clients? And it's a lot of the times exactly opposite of what you've listed down as who your top clients are. Okay. When you're in this category, then you're going to be looking at, again, like we talked about, what is their industry? And sometimes it's like you've niched down on what the industry is that you're specifically going after. Their psychographics, like I talked about, and their demographics. But what I want to point out here is that if you are not operating in this circle, and this is what your radar graph is going to show you, that if you have your top clients, but you don't have some of the other things, that we're going to go, then you get somebody who is constantly pressuring you on your price. Like, hey, why can you lower your price for me? Can you, I want more out of you. And this gray area is what happens when you're missing one of the other circles. So the top client area, can you see that it really comes up with price pressure and the dollars for hours? So when you don't know who your top clients are, price becomes a real, real big issue. The opposite of that is when you have found your top clients, they don't seem to worry about your price. In fact, I'm going to say that some of our top clients say, are we paying you enough? Are you sure? I can't believe how much you're doing for me. Which the first time that was said to me, I nearly fell off my chair. And then I had to say, what's different about this? And then we could identify. And when the second person said that, I was like, whoa, this wasn't just a fluke. And we really start looking at like what makes them different than the rest of them. And we could identify it immediately and say, okay, how do we find more of those people? Because we knew that they loved what we were offering, and then we could adjust ourselves. And that's what I mean about taking what you've got, documenting it, and then adjusting. Hey, this makes a difference. Sometimes it's for us, it's the size of their business. And not just the problems that they're going or the industry or anything else. So that's why I want you to double down, write it down, and then go back and keep on looking at it. And when you have an area where you're getting constant price pressure, then we're going to go into these other places, but you can start and say, am I attracting the right clients? Because if I am not, then these dollars for hours and the price pressure is going to come in a little bit more. And I say that very loosely because I think that dollars always becomes something that, I mean, I was trained to always ask for a discount. That was just the way I was brought up. And so it has nothing to do with, with anything else. So take that into consideration. But if absolutely everybody is doing that, then perhaps it isn't. They aren't truly who it is that is going to be that you want to clone more and more of. Okay. We're going to go to our second circle, which is your unique offering. This is what makes you truly different from your next competitor. And I'm going to say this feels really, really hard a lot of the time until you take some thought process, step away, and really scrutinize this. And our next webinar is really going to go into a little bit on this unique offering. This one is talking about actually what you provide to somebody else and what you say that you provide. But it also is going to tie into what Mike Michalowicz refers to as the queen bee role. And that's what our next one is. It's that critical function that must be protected at all costs. Otherwise, you cease to be who you are as a company. And this, when we talk about the unique offering, it's like, what makes you different than your competition? And you really have to think through that. And sometimes it takes looking at who your competition is and what they're saying about themselves to say, oh, I didn't realize we were all saying that same thing. This has to do with what you sell or the services that you provide, how you sell it, and also how you deliver it. So in all of these areas. Okay, these are the pieces that help you to start to identify what it is. We start off with your vision. Your vision is, why did you start your company in the first place? Why? What was it about it that you are doing that just instead of going out and working for somebody else, that you went out on a limb and said, I want to build a business for what purpose? This is very different than your business mission. The mission of my business is to fulfill this goal, this task, they can tie together, but oftentimes they don't. So perhaps your vision is to change the world in some way or make your world a better place. Yep, Aowen.
I was just thinking about what that is for us.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, Jen, with us, I think, and those rewatching, you get emails from Holly, and that's probably the only contact with Holly you will have. But Holly is Sum of All Numbers founder, and her reason for creating Sum of All Numbers and building the company as she has is so that women who support their families can have great jobs working from home. And she had that vision way before the pandemic. She really built that out in like 2009, 2010, and that stands behind it. And I'm often talking to folks interested in working with us, and that comes up in the conversation. It's not gendered, whatever their gender, they're really impressed by that, and they understand the huge value and the importance of that in our world. So yeah.
And when you look at your vision, it's like, why would you want to be 10 times as big? And I tell this to my team all the time. Why do we want to be 10 times as big? Because for them, it's like, well, I don't want 10 times as much work and I don't want 10 times as much headache. So the vision often correlates with like, because I would like to offer 10 times as more women out there who want to work from home and also be able to leave and go to their child's preschool graduation, that is not that most employers would be like, no way, it's a preschool graduation. But for us, that's part of our vision. And I would love to offer that to more women or men who support their families, who really want to have that part in with their families. So our business mission is to drive entrepreneurs toward financial peace. That has to do with the service that we provide. So whether or not you knew that I even had children or that I worked from home didn't really matter, except that this falls into part of what makes us unique. But my mission is to make sure that if you work with us, you're getting a real sense of peace, whether it's knowing what your numbers are or helping you solve a problem or having someone to talk to about it or whatever else. And so when you look at your company, you may not have thought about what your vision is or what your mission is, or perhaps you inherited the company you have, or it's at this time. A lot of times these aren't flushed out, and you get to a certain place and you're like, hey, I guess it's really a nice time for me to see, what is this. When we look at our mission, we ask ourselves all the time, are we fulfilling this? Are we fulfilling this? And where do we come short, so that we can make sure, like, this is why we exist for our customers. We've touched on immutable laws. This is this area where it's like, I refuse to work with you if you break this law of whatever it is. I mentioned honesty, and for a lot of people, honesty is something. You know, at the end of the day, the CPA signs off on everything that we do. We don't file taxes here. It would be very easy for us to be like, okay, we're going to put this here and just pass it on and let the CPA deal with whatever activity or whatever else. But just the fact that it's such an immutable law for us, because I then am requiring my people to do something that feels yucky. And I say it that way, that it just does not feel good. Now, there are other customers, there are other places that you'll find, and they'll congregate together and like, if you want a creative way that won't land you in jail, but might not pass the smell test, come with us. Well, that's not us, but for somebody else it might be. And you know what, there's a place for those type of top clients. So, but The other pieces that come into immutable laws are it might be on how somebody treats somebody else, the way that they speak to them. It might be on trying to think of other areas where it's like respecting the boundaries of I work during these office hours, and if you need me outside of that, you're not going to be someone that I want to be working with. So you look at that, and again, it flows into your top clients, but I think you can identify like where are the ones where I'm like, nope, goodbye, get out of here. So we have one client that prides himself on having a very amazing office staff to greet you when you come in. The lobby is, and everyone is dressed very nicely and professionally. Do you know that one of their immutable laws is that um, unfortunately some of the women there have been hit on by the people walking in the door? And guess what? The boss will come right back out and say, "Thank you. I don't want your business. You may leave now." As soon as the women say that, it's not a okay, sorry about that, we'll but that's what I'm saying is this such a clear, definitive thing of telling someone, I don't want your money. This can help you see what your unique offering is as well. Uh, also, in looking at this immutable law, you can look at what is your competitor putting up with that you don't put up with as you're looking, trying to figure out what your unique offering. Then for some of us, the product or the service that you have really does set you apart, and that would play into your unique offering. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what is labeled as your area of innovation, an area that just truly stands out. And I'm going to go into that into our next slides here. All right. So those other things are a little bit self-explanatory, but this area of innovation is, I want you to think about the thing that you do that you truly excel at and that you want to continue getting better and better and better at. And that you can ask yourself and you start asking, what do I do? Like keep on asking yourself. So we deal with numbers, and numbers are numbers in the sense that 1 + 1 will always equal 2. And a net income is always this calculation. And we are dealing in a structure that banks can depend upon what we do. The IRS can be depend upon what we do, the CPA, an investor, the business owner, everything else. And so when we look at this, what we have realized for us, the one thing that we do and really do well is getting into the behavior types of the business. Now, that is very much doubled down on in a profit first world, that if you can recognize what scares you, what doesn't scare you. So let's talk about debt. If you're a person that debt doesn't scare you, do you think that's going to impact the way your financials look? Absolutely. What else about growth or taking risks? Do you think as an entrepreneur, the way your financials look are going to be dependent upon your behavior about risk? Risk and debt are huge ones that we identify, but there's a whole bunch of different things as well. And so behaviors are squishy and they're different from person to person. And guess what is not squishy? Financial statements and math. And so what we've realized is we're really good at this, but guess what? We love it. And we're constantly just dialing down on that and saying, no, you've got to take that into consideration. And this is something they don't teach behavior in school when you become an accounting major. They don't. They could care less about behavior. But for us, this has really been an area. And when we asked ourselves, what's our area of innovation? It was the thing that really, really stood out. And so perhaps you have that same thing. I'm going to use one of our clients as an example. They are in the roofing industry, and the roofing industry for the state that they're in is unregulated. Your child could be like, I'm going to be a roofer today. I'm going to put on a new roof. They don't have to be licensed. They don't have to have certification. They could get an insurance policy to just general liability, and they can go out and start selling roofs and putting roofs on your houses. And so what has ended up is in that field, there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of lack of transparency because who's going to say, yeah, well, last week I was working at Walmart, but this week I'm putting on roofs or whatever else it is. And so they realized that their area of innovation was on extreme transparency. Why were they good at it? Because they were very detailed. Why else were they good at it? They loved to document everything and had systems in place, and they systemized everything so that they could double down on that. And they kept on keep on innovating it and making it even better. No, this is what your policy says. No, I'm going to read your policy. This is what our contract is. We're so transparent. And they are constantly, they it wasn't a one and done. They continue even to this day, decades after being in business, of taking of realizing their area of innovation and really, really excelling at it and diving into it. Do you see how they could have this is going to attract their top clients and their people are going to talk about it to other people as well, and it sets them apart. So here are some questions. What area is currently not being addressed by your industry? Again, the strengths of your person, of who you are. What does the market really want from you that they're not getting? What gets you excited? And truly knowing what you're excited about, it has to be part of the equation. And then what are you naturally drawn to as well? Because when you're the owner of the business, you get to decide what direction the business is going. And when you identify this, then you then are going to attract and you're going to hire people that are going to go along these areas. And especially when you realize where your natural tendencies. And then, which leads us to this last one, how can I incorporate the strengths into our company's area of innovation? These are the questions that you ask yourself and you go back to it and back to it. And I don't expect anyone to leave this and have an answer, but this is meant for you to really ponder on, go back, write it down and such. So this is the beautiful little formula. We insert your mission statement. We accomplish this by what your company does, who you do it for. We're known for, and then you can put it here. The benefits or results our customer experience are, and you list them all out. And then we always or never, and this is your immutable laws. And as you get that down together, then you give yourself a place of like, oh my goodness, this is the pitch that needs to be heard every single place I go that really sets me apart. So, what do you do with that information that I just gave you? You call yourself something just a little bit differently. And what it's meant is to pique the interest of somebody else to be like, wait a minute, I want to know more. You don't want it to cause confusion. And then, oh, this is so funny. I told her, put a picture in this for me. Instead, she wrote the words. Sorry, I didn't get this far into it. I was like, so when you think of a lawyer, a policeman, a doctor, then it's like, well, what would make the doctor look different? And maybe the doctor is, if you have a doctor in a coat, a suit and tie, or like my pediatrician, that it was St. Patrick's Day and he came in an all green suit, a green coat and green pants. Why did I go to that pediatrician? I went to that pediatrician because he would get on the floor and talk to my kids. Because what child, after getting shots, wants to go to the doctor? Not one. Guess what my kids want? And they don't give lollipops, they give stickers, but everyone gives stickers. But this guy, he walked in and he related. He was weird. He didn't relate to me as a mom at all. My husband's a doctor. I didn't need him to relate to me. I needed him to relate to my kids because my husband could take care of the things that a typical doctor, but for me, he wore green. That is not a typical doctor. And so for you, you have to say, what makes me look different than the person that typically is in this space? So now, again, so this is the rapid residential construction services. What does that say? That you get things done, it's for the people in not commercial spaces, and we do construction, but very, very. Or if you're a hedge fund technology specialist, then you say that, or if you're a hedge fund, but you really specialize in technology, then you would put, I'm a hedge fund technology specialist. Or for me, we just do fractional CFO with the full charge bookkeeping support is my pitch there. And then when somebody says, well, oh, tell me more about that, because usually those two are separated. I'm like, yeah, but what we really do is we dial down on the behaviors. And I could put behavioral based, but that would cause confusion. What do you mean behavioral based? And so we've looked at that over and over and over again to say, what do you do with that? And you're trying to really get your pitch phrase there. Again, your biggest strength, with your immutable laws and your area of innovation. As you get here, you're no longer going to have those dollars for hires. And if you don't, and then the area that becomes the problem is that if you don't have a way to scale this, you're going to become a place where you're like, I can only grow it for as much time as I have on my plate if you're not able. And that's what we're going to go into next. All right. Our last one is systemization. And I'm going to say this typically is the last thing that gets addressed by entrepreneurs. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you can do most everything yourself and you have all the passion and the desire. But what ends up happening is you attract more and more, and there's not enough of you to go around. And so you have to build your team. And what happens when you build your team? Every time something gets passed down, you lose a little bit and you lose a little bit. So how do you get to a place where it's like, no, we can continue to grow, but nothing of you gets lost as it flows from you to somebody else? And that's where systemization comes in. This is where you can grow, but nothing, the product, the service, your area of innovation, your everything remains the same. And that you become the Nike or the Coca-Cola or all of those big brands, they had to come to a place as well where they could have systems in place that, can you just imagine if you're like, well, I'm going to go get a Coke today. I hope it tastes the way it does that if it was produced out of California versus if it was produced out of New York. Can you see how it's like your systemization is like, this is the formula that we use that everybody can depend upon, and I can become a legacy later on or pass this on to someone else. Systemization is also one of the risk factors that if you do not have these things in place, then your business is not something that is desirable to pass on, whether it's the next generation or the next owner or the next investor or whatever else. So in all of these big companies that end up selling for millions and crazy millions that we all hear that we wish that were us someday, like the Facebook, they had systems in place. This is the way we do it. This is what you can count on. And you have no idea who's pressing the levers on the other side, whether it's Sally or Joe or Zuckerberg himself. You just don't know because they've got the systems in place. It's one of the hardest things and it takes the longest as well. And so, like I said, typically this is going to be one of the last things that you get working on. Why is it so tough? Because nobody takes care of your baby the way you take care of your baby. And so you have to say what is completely has to be there in order for this to continue to be what I envision this to be. And sometimes those take a little bit longer to nail down. So what you're looking for is how do I clone myself? But what you really need to say is, what do I need in a system that anyone who's sitting there could do it if they have certain attributes, abilities, gifts, talents, whatever else it is. Sometimes you find at this place that the model truly isn't scalable. And you have to go back to the drawing board and say, all right, what pieces of it aren't scalable and what needs to happen here? And then that requires a little bit of tweaking, a little bit maybe automation, something of a combination. And so that's why I say when it's not just a matter of having something spelled out and say, just follow these pieces. I'm going to say that when Aowen joined our company, she is as close a clone to me as possible, that we thought a lot of like. Yes, I don't know if that's good or bad. Anyone to video. I think it's great, but I don't know if you do, but that's okay. But we'll often say like, okay, you approach things in the same way. I would not have known to look for someone who responds instead of reacts. And yet that is one of the attributes that is part of me, that I just respond and I'm not very reactive. And so sometimes you don't even know until you try and you fail. And I'm going to say for those clients that grow, that I expect you to try and fail. Somebody said that they hired someone thinking, okay, I think this is what I need. This is the system in place, only to find that, oh my gosh, it isn't really the system I need. I need to adjust it. And then that person wasn't the right person and they had to fire them, or the person said, I didn't get hired for this. I don't want anything to do with this. And when I'm talking to this colleague of mine, he said, did you know it usually takes the third hire before you get it right? And it has nothing to do with the hiring. It has the fact that you're trying to scale and you keep on changing your mind because you're realizing, oh, that leads to a dead end. And when he said that, it was the most freeing thing for me, because you think, gosh, what's wrong with me that I couldn't figure this out the first time? So I pass that on to you if you get to that place and find yourself there, because you as the owner, you get to decide what things you tweak and what things you double down on. Now, your systemization should touch every element of your business. And that's the other reason why it takes so long to get to this place, and that it's a constant improvement for you as well. You have to think, what is my marketing efforts? What is our system for reaching the marketing? Because if you are going after those top clients, certain keywords must always be there, or you might have a brand that has to always be there, or you might have to be careful about, I don't know, non-disclosures or whatever else might be there. That then goes into your sales. What is the sales process like? What systems do you follow there? How do we track all of this? Then you say, all right, go through the whole thing. And for some of us, our processes to go through quite a bit, and some of us, it's very short. But start from the marketing to the sales to onboarding of a client to the delivery and whether they're shipping or how you receive payments. And the piece that you want to do is that you want to document this, and you want to document it in the same way, which is your standard operating procedures. And then it's something that as you scale, you're like, go back over here and look at, this is the way we take care of this, that we go in and follow this method, and it will always work every single time. And when it doesn't work, then you tweak it just a little bit. But now it doesn't matter where you're at the start of this or you're 10 years in, you're like, yep, this is how we handle it. Now, can you see that for the stage that we're in right now, AI is coming in. So some of us are going to have to redo our systems and processes because there's so much more that can be automated. There's not a problem anymore because we still know where we're going to end up, but the steps in between. Again, always not an easy thing to do, but so necessary. That's why I put this in here. Please be very patient and please refine this over and over. So most companies that are very successful with this, the first thing they start off with is, this is how we write our standard operating procedure. And they have a format. It's always in a Word document, or it's always on a Google document, or it's always in a PDF, or whatever it is. And then it's like, and there must be, this states who it is, or whatever else it is. And the first time I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, you have to tell me what it is that I have to have first before I do it. But then I realized, my goodness, every company who is really done the best job of this, it's all done the same way. And why? Because now it can be scaled and repeated, and there's an expectation, and that's what you're setting for everyone else who comes in. This is the way we do it here. There also has to be training around that. And then you realize the first new eyes that come in, you're like, oh my goodness, it's not as clear as I thought it is. Oh, this has changed from the last time we did this. Oh, there were things that I thought everyone knew and they don't know. Recognizing the risk to your system. And the reason I say that is that sometimes we have a sales process, I'll use sales, and you might get all the way down to that and realize, oh my goodness, why do most of our sales fall off? And it's because a lawyer has to sign off on it. So if you're in that kind of business where a lawyer has to get involved, perhaps you redo your system and say, we bring your lawyer in from the very beginning. We give them our template and tell them this is where we start, and we ask for the input there. And you redo your system and start based upon where the risks are of a problem taking place. Another risk to your system might be if you are shipping things and There, you can't depend upon the postal system anymore, or UPS is no longer here, or whatever else might be going on. When you recognize your risks, then you can go backtracking into your systemization and say, we need to reorder this. And if we take care of it here, it's even a better system. And that, when it's all documented, it's easy to say, oh, this needs to happen earlier than others. We've been in this pattern for the past 6 years since COVID, where all sorts of risks have come up that most of us haven't lived through before. None of us had lived through a pandemic before, unless you were around in 1918 when the Spanish flu came. And if you were that, then you deserve a trophy for still being alive and working and attending my webinar. There you go. But most of us have not been there. A lot of us have not been through extreme inflation unless you were operating your business in the 70s when that happened. A lot of us have not dealt with tariffs. Well, yeah, we had dealt with tariffs before, but maybe not to the extreme. We've dealt with wars. Have we dealt with wars that have affected the gasoline or whatever else? We've dealt with supply chain crises or shortages in different areas. And then now we've got AI. All of these things are bringing new risks to our business that are going to then challenge us with resystematizing. So that's where the practice comes in and the refining. And every new hire for me, then I just say, you are going to be my greatest asset because you're going to point out where my flaws are that I need to identify and get better at. And it's been wonderful because most of the time they're like, oh my goodness, 80% of this is great. Hey, I found 20%. Well, guess what? 4 years ago, it was like, I found 90% of things that are unclear and 10% are good. And so we've just kept on practicing and refining, practicing and refining. So ask your customers, what did you enjoy about this? What could we do better? Especially those top clients that are already your raving fans. All right, this brings us back to the beginning where you can see here, if you don't have a systemization if you have a systemization and you have your top clients, but you don't have a unique offering, then there's a price pressure. That's what this over here says. A unique offering will be like, well, why should I pay that? I can go someplace else for that. If you have a unique offering and you have systemization, but you don't have your top clients, then nobody cares because they're like, okay, whatever, because you don't know who you're going to. If you have your top clients and a unique offering, but you don't have a systemization, it's your dollars are for hours and not for scalability. These gray areas are the areas that cause the problems. And so when you fill out your assessment with the questionnaire and you see where you're off, you can see exactly what you might be experiencing. And I'm going to say the majority of the time when someone fills out that assessment and does the graph of it, you could yeah, that's why those questions are written the way they are, is to say, hey, this is where I need to start first. So you've got your questions. Those of you that are listening to this, you can go back and then you're going to answer those questions and then you graph it out. So question number 1 is this right here, and you rank yourself from 1 to 5. So if you got a number 5 on that, it's a little dot right there. If you got a 2, can you say a 4, then it's on this line. If it's a 3, it's here. If it's a 2, it's there. If it's 1, and you're going to put the dot with what you answered. And then you're going to go to question number 2. Whatever you answered, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, put a dot. So let's say that your dot was here and then your dot was here. You're going to draw a straight line. And then you're going to draw a straight line. And what you're trying to see is how close am I to this middle? And am I even in here? And let me tell you, for us, a long time we were right over here and we knew exactly what we needed to focus on. We focused on that, brought it into our circles, got it down here, and then a long time our systems were here. So it should change. And I'm going to say you don't need to do this every year, but every time you're experiencing, hey, why am I not having rapid growth or organic growth that I don't need, that is not taking a lot of effort? That's your trigger to say it's time to go back to this and to see where we are. All right, that opens us up for any questions that we have. That was a lot of information. In fact, as I was going through this, I thought we could do a whole a whole session just on top clients and dialing down on the exercise of that, how you find those people, where you go to find out that information. We could then go into and do our unique offering. You could tell we could spend a lot of time on that, and we could go a lot of time on the systemization and such. So but those are all areas that we cover here at Sum of All Numbers in our practice on a daily basis in working with people. So I'll open it for any questions at this time. We probably are not going to have very many, but I also want to share this with you to say, if you want to know more and you want to dive into this, that this is an area that you can tell that I am passionate about, that I believe full-heartedly in. I've experienced it myself as running the business, and I've seen the difference it makes on the people that I work with on it as well. And then go pick up the Pumpkin Plan. The Audible is amazing. It's a fast read. It talks about giant pumpkin, the people that grow those giant pumpkins and how they do it. That's the premise behind it, why it's called the Pumpkin Plan. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It has been a delight to be with you, and we look forward to seeing you next month when we talk about kind of really dialing more into that area of innovation, but specifically on the function in your business that must be looked at all costs. Have a great rest of your weekend.